don't sweat the small things. I remember my point is when I first started, I was like, okay, I got to get my business cards together. I have to, have people, what are going to be the colors of your company that you put on the website? You got to pick your colors and brand. I'm not saying that's not important, but I look back and I feel like the first 6 months, maybe not that quite that long, but it was so focused on getting your LinkedIn profile page perfect, getting that website perfect, and noticing a few things and going back and forth with the developer. And I look back now and honestly, Art, I don't know if I'm proud to say this, I can't remember the last time I looked at my website. I can tell you, I've been on my knees a lot more in the last 5 years and probably my previous almost 45 years in life. I've read a book called Jesus is My CEO, and always remembering, who's in control of this company when things are good or bad, just like life in general.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited today to have with us Charles Roselle, who is a follower of Jesus, a family man, and someone who is running his own security firm after a career in the Secret Service. Charles, most welcome to the Life in Transition podcast.
Well, Art, thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. Starting off as we always do, jumping in, Charles, what would you consider to be one of the most meaningful or impactful transitions that you've been through in your life?
Probably most people would think, your transition from the government, you're 16 years with the Secret Service and going to the private sector. But actually for me, the most impactful and probably the most difficult was when I transitioned from the private sector to entrepreneur, to starting my own business. And it was just immediately that feeling of I felt so alone. I didn't have coworkers there to bounce ideas off of. And, starting a business and working out of my home, it felt, lonely. And I also realized very quickly that I might have put founder, owner, CEO on the business card, but you have to do everything. You're the executive assistant. You have to get projects so you make revenue. But while you're doing those projects, you also have to put on your business development hat to get future projects, the accountant and, end of the day or that night, checking any emails. So it was a lot. So that's definitely, and I'm still learning. I'd like to say I have it all together, but after a little over 5 years of doing it, I've learned a lot, but I know I still have a lot to learn.
So that was 5 years ago when you made that transition from practice, let's say, private sector of employment to being your own founder of this security firm. And 5 years in, first of all, congratulations. Most companies don't make it 5 years.
there was times I wondered. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's okay. Like a lot of people, and I'm one of these people like that. In the past I would have thought, well, it's not okay to fail at a business. I've failed at 2 or 3. Yeah. And it's okay. It's part of the journey, right? And venture capitalists know that very well, right? They bet on 20 to get 1.
But they get back up. You keep going, whatever it might be in your industry. So
what was the thing that made that the most impactful transition for you? So you're 5 years in now. What was it that, because I had a podcast earlier today and the guy said, hey, what's the difference between a change and a transition? Why do you call it life in transition and not just change? And I said, because transition is something that happens inside of you. Yeah. A change is external. Right. But transition is doing the work so that the external change actually makes a difference. Yeah. So think about that with you, with this step going into your own venture. What's been impactful? What have you learned? What's been impactful inside of you, Charles, as you've made this change?
I think when you said it, when you're like, this is your own venture, it's taking ownership of what you're doing, and I say, if you can't bet on yourself, why should others? Like, why should others buy my security services if I don't believe in it? So a lot of it was just what I learned, which was great in my 16 years with the service, then 3 years in the private sector, taking ownership of what I learned and realizing now it's on me to, bring that to potential clients. So it's that ownership. I can tell you, and I know as you led off in the podcast that I am a proud Jesus follower. I can tell you I've been on my knees a lot more in the last 5 years than probably my previous almost 45 years in life. So I think I read a book pretty early on that was recommended to me called Jesus is My CEO. And I'm always remembering, who's in control of this company when things are good or bad, just like life in general. So keeping that, that him is always, he's always the one that, would be leading the company and helping make those decisions. But yeah, I think a lot of it's just, like I said, taking ownership. You feel alone because it's just you, because I'm a sole member LLC,
Right.
but taking ownership and taking pride, in your work. Cause it's not like you can blame it on, well, this was somebody else's. It's my name on it. But
Right.
also with the
Right.
ownership, I can tell you, I learned quickly. People tell me, well, you start and get your business cards and you get your website. And I created an advisory board, which was a lot of my parents' friends from Nashville, very
Right.
successful people. And they were nice enough to say, yes, I'll give you free advice whenever you need it and helpful. So you paint that picture of like, we're this big company. But I remember early on when I was speaking with a potential client, I provided them a proposal and I met with them in person. And I did, like I continue to do this day, talking about what we can do for you. Called me, he
Right.
said, hey, I have a few things to go over the proposal. And there's a couple of quick items. The last one was like, hey, I think we're going to move forward. We just want to make sure that, are you going to do it or somebody else from your team? So, it's like, don't worry. I told him, I was like, I'll do this one. But, taking ownership and trying to say we as a team, but, realizing that it all falls on you.
Right. At that time. Yeah. And I think how different is that than what you found in working for the government and or even working in the private sector? Like how big of a shift is that?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, like in the Secret Service, it was, you always had your coworkers around, whether you're in the preparation
Right.
phase, you had other agents with you, or even when you're in the field office working criminal cases, you're always working with another agent or another person on the
Right.
task force. You rarely, if ever, are working by yourself. And maybe if you're in the office working on paperwork, you always have somebody there to bounce ideas off of or ask questions.
Right.
So that was, and
Right.
it's very similar in the private sector too. So this is, now I'm sitting there and it's like, okay, well, who do I ask for this? So
Right.
I do say we a lot, but I've also been very intentional on having good resources in place that I can reach out to. I can call Art and ask him, because I know he's been through this before, whether it's something in the
Right.
specific security industry. I have some good security experts that I can reach out to and, hey, are you seeing this trend, or what would you do in this situation? But also running a business as well. Those kind of people that, hey,
Right.
I've been here before. I would suggest you stay away from this, or yes, do this. Or I have no idea what you're talking about, but here's somebody else that might know. So I think that's very important to have those resources in place where you can bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, no, I coach a lot of business owners, and that's one of the things obviously that's really valuable from a coach, but also a lot of them have also said that also a peer group
Yes.
is super valuable, right? If you can find other people that, are running security firms,
Right.
around the country, or create a peer group. I created a peer group when I started my coaching business and my podcasting business because there wasn't one that I saw around. So I just had it this morning. There's 5 of us that are been going for a year,
That's great.
and it is really great, right? So both having a coach, having an advisory board, and having a peer group. I've had many clients that have said, and it's even often peer groups of companies that would be their competitors if they were in the same geographical or cyberspace, right? They're doing exactly the same thing, but in different areas of market. So they're not competitors.
I understand that because there's a couple guys that I talk to here in the Middle Tennessee, greater Nashville area, that their companies provide very similar services to mine. But I consider them friends first, and we're always bouncing ideas, and we share business too. If it's something that I can't do at the time, and vice versa. But I think it's very important to have those, peer groups, advisory boards, whatever it might be.
But to have that sense of ownership that the buck stops with you for everything, but then also to be, really intentional to overcome the isolation or the loneliness of being working by yourself from your house and not having the automatic camaraderie and connection that you would have sitting in an office with somebody else or being on a protection assignment with somebody else. Has been really, really challenging. If you could go back 5 years from what you've learned now, I mean, you've made it 5 years in this business. You've survived, and hopefully, I don't know how far along the road you are to thriving. But if you could go back and tell your younger self something 5 years ago, Charles, what would that be?
I think the thought that comes to the top of my head would be, don't sweat the small things. I remember my point is when I first started, I was like, okay, I got to get my business cards together. I have to, have people, what are going to be the colors of your company that you put on a
Right.
website? You got to pick your colors and brand. I'm not saying that's not important, but I look back and I feel like the first 6 months, maybe not that quite that long, but it was so focused on getting your LinkedIn profile page perfect, getting that website perfect, and noticing a few things and going back and forth with the developer. And I look back now, and honestly, Art, I don't know if I'm proud to say this, I can't remember the last time I looked at my website. But at that time,
Right.
if I saw an issue on the third page that you scroll down, I was calling you, my web designer, like, hey, we got
Right.
to fix this yesterday. So I think some of it, but you learn from it, right? But I think
Right.
don't forget the
Right.
small stuff. That all okay. It's important to have a website and your logo and have a nice LinkedIn profile or whatever it might be. But really focus on the value that you can bring to clients, is what it comes down to. And it's still like that today, but what is your purpose? What are you selling, and what kind of value, and constantly driving that home and showing the return on investment you can bring to potential clients, and not as worried about what are going to be the colors of your company.
Right. Yeah. No, I could raise my hand with that. I spent a fair amount too when I launched on 3 websites and this and that and the other, and I'm at some point I'm going to redo them because it's it's not that it doesn't fit where I feel I'm at anymore, and I didn't need to spend so much energy on that at the beginning. For
Just
sure,
kind of figure it out as you go along instead of waiting until
need to have a landing page, need to have something.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. What's the biggest lesson? It's not every day I get to talk to someone who's a Secret Service agent. And what's the biggest lesson that you brought from that into maybe it's 2 parts, into your business, but also into your life, like the training that you've been through, the experience that you've been through there. It's fairly unique. What are a couple of takeaways that you would bring, one to your business, and then maybe one also that you see that can apply generally to your life that you've taken away from that experience?
Yeah, I think from the business mindset is in the Secret Service, it wasn't one of those where if an incident happened, you as my supervisor would let me know at 5:00. I'm like, yeah, I'll follow up on that tomorrow. You had that mindset that, we have to figure this out now, whether it's a case, maybe it was a protective intelligence issue or incident. So having that mindset helps when it comes to business, because I know when I first started and launched my company, if I sent somebody an email, if they didn't respond that day, I'm like, well, what's wrong with this person? Because I was so used to that, you should respond within 5 minutes. I'll give you an hour though. And then if it a couple of days, I'm like, you couldn't be that busy. So again, I think it's that just, you do what you say you're going to do, because there was many times I'd have coffee meetings with people like, yeah, I'll follow up with you in 2 days about, this proposal. And I wouldn't hear from them in 2 days. So I'd call them on the third day thinking, you said you were going to call me yesterday. I learned from that, not to take that stuff personal.
Right.
People have other things going, but
I think that's very valuable when you said, hey, Jesus and God's in charge, not me, right? That's a good way of not taking stuff personal. Right.
So I think that mindset, and I think, the takeaway from the service, just, overall, is very mission oriented. We have that dual mission of protection and investigations, but everything was so mission oriented and mission driven, and just just the overall protection. That's what most people know the Secret Service agents for, is protection in general. But I think using that in life, I feel like I'm a very good protector of my family and friends. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm dressed up with an earpiece in and walking my family to church or to school, but just being aware, of surroundings and being a good protector. I know that's one of the many benefits that the service taught me that I use not only in business, but in life in general, especially in the environment we live in now.
Yeah, and I'm sure that extends beyond, I'll say, physical protection.
Correct.
As well.
Correct.
Right. It's a mindset of how am I doing the right things to strengthen.
And it's also thinking ahead too, because I tell a lot of people when they ask about the Secret Service, we're not like Navy SEALs necessarily, and you could kill me with your small finger. We're more what I consider like a wedding planner on steroids, in the sense that we are very good at advance work. If the president's coming to your house in Florida, we'd be there 4, 5, 6, 7 days ahead of time, planning everything, contingency plans, working with the local PD. So we're very good at that. So what I mean by that is the protection, like you said, not just physical, is thinking ahead, trying to think ahead of what could happen. So how are we going to mitigate that, whether it's from family side or from business side? What are we doing to mitigate that so that doesn't happen? Or if it does happen, what are we going to do about it?
Right. No, and those are both lessons that apply, in so many aspects of life, and especially when you're, as you said, family man, you're raising kids, you're being, doing your best to be a good husband. These things are very long-term commitments,
Right.
and the actions you take today have impact, decades.
Yeah. Like I tell my
road.
13-year-old daughter that, when she starts dating, I'll probably be in the back seat of the car, just to let her know. So I already put that in her head that dad's always going to be around when she starts dating.
This episode of the Life and Transition Podcast is brought to you by MidLife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. MidLife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition. And we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. Yeah. And to practice with her, take her on dates, and hey, this is how a gentleman behaves, and this is exactly right. This is so that it's not such a big step when it's not you all the time when she goes away to university or whatever the case is. How has this transition? Speaking of family and relationships, but all of your relationships, how is this transition going to your own business? How has it affected your relationships in your life, Charles? I mean, you can think about the important ones, but it could be your family, friendships, even business relationships. How has it affected you in a way that's a change, that's showed up in your relationships?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think early on, when I started the business, I was so, I guess you say, wound up. I was passionate, and I still am, but I felt like it was, one thing I'm still learning is when do you turn it off?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not it's not 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever you want to call it, Monday through Friday. So I think at first, with your question in regards to relationships, I born and raised in Nashville, and moved away for 25 years and moved back about 5 years ago when I started the business, and having a lot of relationships already here. When I'm meeting with friends, early on, is let's talk about our friendship and other things. But I felt like I was always talking about the business because that was everything that was on my mind. I'm not necessarily trying to sell stuff to my friends like, hey, you have a big company. Do you need some security? But I felt like I was always talking about it. And I realized pretty early on that, hey, I can meet Art, my good friend, for lunch. And if he asks about it, I'll bring it. If not, let's just chat. So kind of learning how to just kind of wait and pause, and if it's appropriate, we'll talk about it. But it's great to be passionate about what you're doing.
Absolutely,
you don't want it. I don't think you want it to where it spreads. Where now people behind my back are like, I don't know if I want to meet up with Charles because all he's going to do is talk about his business, or how, hey, I know you're connected to this person. Can you get me a meeting? So I think kind of putting the brakes on, where being able to somewhat separate, business and relationships. I mean, sometimes they do commingle, and when it's appropriate, but letting that
it's
happen.
important to know that we have, I'm going to quote Arthur Brooks now, real friends, not just deal friends.
Absolutely.
Right. And if you're only doing business, then you don't know until you leave that business or leave that relationship, business relationship, you don't know whether they're real friends or deal friends.
That's
all that you have.
So,
right.
And
it's important to have those real friends as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I heard, it was a little while ago, but I think this is also something that's shifted for me a lot in the last 5 years, is to be interesting in a relationship, be interested.
Yes.
All right. And that's something that I always keep in front of me, like going into every situation, it's okay, God, how do you want to use me here? How can I be a channel?
Right.
How can I be of service here? And it starts with seeing the people and being interested in whatever that is. And sometimes it's things related to business and sometimes it's not. And both are okay.
Yeah. I think some of it is just listening. Like sometimes it's like, it's okay, just keep your mouth shut and listen to what your friend, the other person across from you is saying. And going with that instead of constantly just.
Yeah. And really listening, right? Like not listening to respond, right? But listening to hear.
Exactly.
Right. I always say, people want to be seen. They don't want to be watched.
Right. Very true.
And I think there's a huge difference, right? And so to keep that in mind in all of our relationships, how has it? And I think it's interesting and important that you brought up like when's enough and where do you draw the line? How has this transition? How has it affected your I'll say your primary relationships and with your family?
Yeah.
Are those better or worse? Are they strained because you're gone so much, or is it? I mean, how does that look?
It's a good question, and maybe in another episode you could have my wife on the podcast.
There you go. Get her take.
But no, it brings up a good story because early on a side note, my wife and I have started another company. I mean, she runs it, but it's a safety and security app. I think we had talked about it.
You mentioned it to me, yes.
And being in that business mindset, I found myself, I'll take full credit for this. A lot of times once we put the kids down, I go into business mode and say like, hey, hey, Holly, what did you see that email from Art? Are you going to answer it? Or do you want me to, just what I thought was basic stuff. And my wife, being the wise woman that she is, there was a point she said, hey, we probably need to set some boundaries on, yes, it is business and we're both passionate about it, but we're also a husband and wife and we're a mother and a father. And, kind of like, there might be some late nights. We're not saying that, but there's a boundary where, not to get to the point where maybe we have to schedule time, like, hey, not tonight, but maybe tomorrow night from 8:30 to 9:30, we can do some follow-up, but just doing some boundaries. So I give her credit. She was the one that brought that up. And I think it's very important. And we do a pretty good job of that moving forward now. So it doesn't consume you. Because, when you're running your own business or really two businesses, if you want it to, it could consume you 24/7.
Yeah.
You could always be busy, for lack of a better term. There's always something to work on or to do. But having those boundaries, and especially like you said, with your closest relationships, with your wife, with my kids, with my close friends, my parents live in the area. So, time with them. Right. So finding those boundaries and going back to Jesus as our CEO, like putting it all in perspective and having those boundaries and balancing everything, you see it still works out. Like if I take a night off and don't answer that email, guess what? It'll be there tomorrow. Having that kind of that mentality.
That's right. Yeah, I heard. I think it was actually my boss said once. We all juggle a lot of balls, but some of them are crystal and some of them are rubber.
Yeah,
and it's important. It's important to know which is which, right? And the one time you drop a crystal ball may not shatter, but the next time it might.
Yeah,
and the rubber ones will bounce back. And mostly the things around career, you can always bounce back.
Right.
But if you do an emotional withdrawal with your wife one too many times, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. And it's really important that we keep those. And I know, I've been heavily involved in 12-Step for Workaholics Anonymous for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's all about, boundaries and not making ourselves busy as a way of not pouring into relationships or not being connected to God or not feeling our own feelings because, we just make ourselves busy because that's our drug.
Right.
Right. And it's very easy to do if you have your own business for sure. And I managed to do it even without having my own business before. So yeah, super important to keep those relationships in check and to see how well you can integrate healthily the businesses and the relationships.
Yeah.
They're still I'll say real friends, not deal friends, because that's the primary side. But I think of like one of my brothers recently has a very successful business and he was having some important clients over to his house. But what they did is the family all made the meal together.
Yeah.
and his sons were the maitre d' and the wait staff.
I love that idea.
Know, and they got to learn what that's like and wear a little tuxedo and all this stuff, right? But it's how can you integrate as well?
Isn't that's just making a deeper connection with these, if you want to call them clients, but they're becoming friends too if they're
exactly at that point
breaking bread at your home with you.
Exactly.
So that's
but involved, not, he didn't cater it out to somebody, and he'll have his friends at a babysitter, or have his kids at a babysitter, right? 10 and 12 years old. No, let's have them be engaged.
I think that's a great idea.
Right? So to have that integration is a theme. Another podcast guest I had on, another local successful business guy in Nashville, Bill Faith, was talking about that. About he's running a very big company now, a lot of influence, and he said, but the key is integration.
Yeah.
And, making sure that my wife and I are on the same page all the time.
Absolutely.
And that's another,
because
frame that I've.
Go ahead.
What's that?
I look at it. If you're not on the same page, it's going to affect your business, right? It's going to be tough to focus on this task at hand of running your business, whatever it might be, if this is not right.
Yeah. No, that's really, really important. Where do you think your life would be now, Charles, if you hadn't made this step onto your own?
That's a great question. I do think about sometime, like if I stayed with the Secret Service, I'd probably be retiring about now. Mm-hmm. Not retiring and looking for a second career, but I also realize that the last, it would have been 10 years, my kids are young, that I would have missed a lot. So there are some times when I talk to some of my buddies who are retiring now and like, we'll find a second job eventually, but I have my pension. I'm like, that must be nice. But I also realize all the work and the work away from home that they did the last 10 plus years. So I can obviously say I have no regrets on leaving. The only thing when people ask, the only thing I really miss is that camaraderie that you make. That's tough to replicate these days. But it's keeping in touch with them is one thing, but I do miss the camaraderie. But I also look at the last 8-9 years, 3 years in the private sector, then 5+ years as a entrepreneur, and what I've learned and how much I've grown. Grown in the business, grown in relationships, grown in also like confidence, and being able to speak to others outside of maybe the security industry, and and hopefully eventually, because so many people have poured into me, especially the last 5 years, mentors, advisory board, people that hopefully I'm starting to, but hopefully, as I continue to progress, being able to do that to others, kind of the pay it forward. Right. So many people have done that for me. And that's what I tell people a lot about Nashville. Like, yes, it's a big town now and it's growing, but I feel like it still has that, especially for business owners, has that small town community feeling. Right. Most people that I've encountered here, they generally want to help you. And if and when they help you, they're not sending you an invoice in the mail, meaning they don't expect anything in return. Now, there's something you can do for them later on down the road. I'm sure that would be great. But that's what I've received. And hopefully soon, if not already started, I want to give, just like so many people, help me.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life, if you're facing, challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I mean, one big difference, I guess, if you hadn't made those transitions is you'd have had a lot less time with your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you can't get that back.
Yeah. And then it sounds like too, that you also have had a growth journey that would have not been possible as far as, inside yourself and learning confidence and facing the alone times, facing the challenges and realizing that you can handle those.
Right.
Which is, it's just like to be here and to not lean into that would be a shame.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to grow yourself and then contribute and then looking forward to those you can contribute for more going in the future as well. And I agree with Nashville. There's been so many people that I've met with there. I mean, even had a chance to meet with Marshall Goldsmith recently. He's a relatively new resident of Nashville, but he's been there for a while now. His daughter teaches at Vanderbilt. And he's someone that, I don't know what his coaching fees are, but like $100,000 an hour or something, right? I mean, this guy's written 40 something books and he's been a big influence on me when I was in the corporate world. But he also, we met and talked and he said, "Hey, you want some coaching?" I said, "Yeah." It was very intense. It was very, to the point,
right?
Very, very valuable, but also thought, "Oh, what bill am I going to see for that?" And he said, "I want you to pass it on."
That's
when
amazing.
You have some, he told me, when you have some young guy like you, right? Come in and whatnot, I want you to make sure you pass that on. And so that, that's to your point about the Nashville business environment.
I think it's so true, which is great. And I hope I can be a part of that on the giving end and not just the receiving end.
Yeah. Well, it's both. Right. And I think it's also a really big sign of maturity. I was reading a Parker Palmer book this morning, to be able to accept the help as well, to realize that it's not that, you already have a lot of this by saying, "Hey, Jesus is the CEO." It's like, I know I'm not doing it all by myself, but there's a lot of us that feel like we're doing it all by ourselves, which is not the case. It's never the case. And it's a little bit egotistical to think that, even though we don't feel like it that way, because we feel like we're suffering through by having to do it all by yourself. But the fact is, we never do it all by ourselves. Right. It takes a village in everything that we do. So it's okay to accept that. And it's also then, of course, good to share it as well when you have the opportunity. Right. Both. Right. And it's a continual dance. So that's also, par for the course, let's say. But to be willing to accept the help is also really important as we progress. If you could give one tool to somebody that's going through transition, especially if it's a big career transition or starting their own firm, it's going through the stress of that or the fear of that, or considering the fear of that, what would be the one tool or one piece of advice that you would offer to someone that's about to embark on this journey that you've been on the last, I'll say 5 to 15 years?
I mean, for me, it'd be simple. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Because it sounds simple, like a lot of things in life, but implementing it, is another thing. There's a thing, and I have next to my desk that I look at every day is for startup success, and it lists about 12 things. Have a clear and concise vision, build a strong team, create a detailed business plan, a couple, other ones like that. But the one that's on here that I think is the most important that goes along that point is find and use mentors. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because there's always, no matter what transition you're going through in life, or maybe it's moving to a different industry, there's always people out there that have been through that exact same transition, and they're probably willing to share their story and you can learn from them. So, maybe don't be afraid to ask for help. And then once you do, find and use mentors, because that helped me immensely. And again, like I alluded to earlier, I hope I can do that for younger people or the younger generation down the road. Because you can't put a price on that. We're talking to a business owner, somebody that went through this similar kind of transition, what they went through, the good, the bad, the mountain experiences, the valleys, areas to, hey, stay away from this, really focus on this. I mean, that's, you can't get that normally in a book or, so that would probably be my biggest piece of advice, or the tool is, don't be afraid to ask for help, and definitely find and use mentors.
No, I love that. And is my wife is we've just moved here to Florida, and she's opening up a cafe here, which I've never been in that business before, but I've been reaching out to all my friends to say, okay, like I have friends there in Nashville, and one that owns 17 restaurants. And I said, hey, what's the potholes? What am I not seeing? Here's the ideas. And then the last question is always, what am I going to look back on in 2 or 3 years and say, that from your experience, and it's invaluable to have that people that have actually walked the road. That's what coaches, mentors, friends are for, to really share that experience. Right. So that's something we can all do. And one of the questions that came up for me, then I thought about my own experience, like, well, how do you do that? But we all have people in our network. And if we don't know somebody that's an expert that's been through that, we know somebody who does know somebody.
Right.
So it's just ask for help from the people that you know. Yeah. And if they don't know, ask the next, ask them who they know that might be able to help you along that way.
Right.
That's great advice. That's great advice. And then final question, Charles, if people want to connect with you, if they want to hear more about your story and or your business, where's the best way for them? How's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, several ways. Our website that shows more information on our services is thetrinityrisksolutions.com. So www.thetrinityrisksolutions.com. Email us at info@thetrinityrisksolutions.com, or you can call us. My business number is 703-400-3878. So any of those ways, like I said, you can see the services through our website or email.
Can they connect with you also on LinkedIn or Facebook or other places?
LinkedIn, yes. Facebook.
So LinkedIn, Charles Roselle. Okay.
I'm still one of those, pretty much just LinkedIn, and that's it.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, Charles, I really appreciate you sharing your story and your experience, with us, that give us some, some guidance. And I love the last piece of the advice of like seek mentors, seek people that have been down the path more, and that as a bulwark against the loneliness and the isolation, as well as really good advice to be able to help you along the way when you're stuck. So thank you so much for taking. Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much for taking the time to share openly with us on the Life in Transition podcast.
Well, thank you, Art. I really enjoyed it.
All right. I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.